Paul, are you ready in the
I
front?
am ready in the front.
Debbie's not quite ready in the back. Now she is. Jane? Okay. And Paul, we know you're good, Commissioner Bell? Okay, wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, February 19th, 2025, and we'd like to welcome everyone to the board meeting. We'll call this meeting to order at 9 o'clock a.m. The teleconference number is 1-971-254-3149. Conference ID 866-914-607#. Audio capabilities are listen only and are offered on a best effort for the public. Our meeting is also live streamed, and you can join us online by going to our website. Live stream is also available at tctvonline.com and click on live broadcasts. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to mute their phone. You can do this by pressing *6. Please unmute your phone when your agenda item is ready to be discussed. For those joining via computer, please unmute your microphone and turn on your camera when your agenda item is called. All others must remain muted with their cameras turned off. Thank you. Public comment. Those intending to provide public comment to the board may attend in person or email submissions to the public comments email on our website. Public comments received by 12 p.m. on Tuesday will be distributed to the board, posted online before the meeting, and become part of the public record. You may also provide public comment virtually by registering ahead of time. To register, please email public comments by 12 p.m. on the Tuesday prior to the board meeting. Public comments can also be mailed to the Board of Commissioners office, 201 Laurel Avenue, Tillamook, Oregon, 97141. For more information on public comment options, please visit the Board of Commissioners webpage. Do we have anyone signed up in the room, or has anyone registered online for public comment?
We do have one person signed up for agenda item 14.
I have item 14. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You signed up for the public comment?
Okay, we have 2 people signed up. Thank you.
Also 14.
Okay. All right, perfect. Well, I would like to welcome everyone who's with us today and invite them to sign the guest list for the meeting, and then we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Fournier, will you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We will begin with our public comment, and just a reminder that you will have 2 minutes for your public comment. And Debbie,
Would you like this up, Mike?
sure, I can call folks out. That would be great. Thank you. Okay, first on our list is April Bailey. And April, if you would come forward, please identify yourself and your area of residence for the record, and then you have 2 minutes. And could you make sure that's glowing green before you begin? Thank you.
Good morning. I'm April Bailey. I live in Muscatine, Oregon. I do want to talk to you about the TLT proposal today, the ordinance that you passed last week. First of all, I want to thank you for the accommodations you made outside of this meeting for hearings. That's very much appreciated. I know there's a lot of public comment, and unfortunately, I was not privy to a lot of it, but I'm asking you to rescind that and not pass it on to voters at this time. And this is one of my biggest concerns is I've not heard any discussion from you all about the cost to local businesses when you raise the rates on the accommodations of the people that visit here. If everybody who visits this county buys one less coffee, one less meal, one less trinket, that's going to be a lot of money lost to these local businesses. Also, the allocation structure is very confusing. And as you know, the legislature is considering changing how that allocation structure is allocated and divided. And it's concerning that we want to pass on the cost of funding our sheriff department through something that is going to change over time, and how that will be mitigated. I am concerned due to the past proposals from this board about funding the sheriff's department, how that might turn out in the long term. Excuse me. Also, Another concern I have is, of course, to the short-term rental owners who I know have made their concerns known to you. But the fact that we don't do any kind of progressive consideration of like big companies that are paying these fees versus, say, a widower that's owned a house for 40 years is very concerning to me. It seems unfair, it seems unjust, and is definitely unequitable. So again, I'm asking you to actually rescind this. Go back to the drawing board. I'd really appreciate if this county would consider more about defunding some programs that we currently fund, such as something you've signed us on to feed illegal aliens with taxpayer funds, things like that, versus raising taxes to fund entities that we are required to fund, such as the Sheriff's Department. Thank you.
Thank you, April. Okay, Janice Laviolette.
Good morning, Commissioners. I am a little behind the scenes here, or behind my game, because I thought this meeting started at 10. That's what was on the internet. So anyhow, I raced here. I'm from North County. My name is Janice Laviolette. I kind of want to echo what April said. I am concerned about the TLT tax raise as well. I would really like to see support of the what's going on in the legislature to get more of an equitable division of the rather than a 70-30 split. I think the advertising has been effective over the years. People know about Oregon in general, particularly the coast. They come here because for obvious reasons. That's why we live here, for the obvious reasons. But at the same time, they're impacting where we live. And it should be a more equitable, if there was the 50-50 split, like what they're trying to do, pass through the legislature, that would go a long ways to fund the things that we need here. And again, if this is passed, it's already going to be in place, a tax that I think is going to deter people. They'll think twice about coming to Tillamook County. And as a former business owner of a campground, I can tell you that it was the least amount of fun I had at my business was telling people, oh, and by the way, there's a tax here for you to stay. And so many people come to Oregon, they know that, we're a tax-free state. And so they would, get their ire up, and then they would say, well, I know we don't have to pay a tax. I think you're trying to cheat me. And then I'd say, it's a transient lodging tax. Well, I'm not a transient. So it was a circular thing that I'm eternally grateful I don't have to do anymore. But as I know other business owners will have had this same discussion all along. It's not an easy thing to pass this off to somebody who is sometimes unsuspecting when they're standing in front of you. And I would really echo if you could delay putting it on the ballot. I'm sure that's probably not going to happen, but I would just wanted to say that I know I'm not alone out there. There's a lot of people that feel the same way that I do. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. We also have two non-agenda items today, two unscheduled items that are going to be taken after items 11 and 12. So with that, we are going to start out today with a presentation, which is always super fun. So we have a Salmonberry Trail presentation today, and we have Caroline Fitchick, the Executive Director of the Salmonberry Trail Foundation, with us. So good morning, Caroline.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Excellent.
Can I give you business?
You can give us that.
Good morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I want to thank Tillamook County also for their support of the Salmonberry Trail Foundation and of STIA, the Salmonberry Trail Intergovernmental Agency. And so today I just have a brief presentation to share with you some of the work that we did in 2024 and some of the work that we're working on in 2025. What you see before you is a map, is a map of the Salmonberry Trail, which spans from Tillamook Creamery up the coastline, of course, through the river valley and down into Banks. In Banks, it will connect up with a series of trails in the Portland metro region in the future. Next slide, please. So in 2024, we were very, very busy, both here in Tillamook County and in Washington County. Next slide. So we worked with many partners on guided hikes. So we did, I can't remember exactly, I think over 40 guided hikes in Washington County and Tillamook County combined, and maybe even more. Commissioner Scar and Representative Javity joined us on one of the hikes up the river segment along the Nehalem River. And then you can see down here, there is City Councilor Karen Matthews from the city of Wheeler. We've been working in the city of Wheeler, and then also there's Sam from the Oregon Coast Scenic Railroad. We've been working closely with them on trail plans for Wheeler and for the Tillamook Creamery. Next slide, please. We also engaged in a lot of community activities. This is the city of Rockaway. As you all know, they do an amazing 4th of July parade every year, and we joined them this year on bikes, as you can see. Next slide, please. We've been doing happy hours. In 2023, we did a lot of happy hours. These are community engagement events at local businesses to really be able to develop community connections with members of the community. So we started that here at the coast. Next slide, please. And we did our first legislative tour here. Commissioner Forner joined us also on that tour, which was great. So we had about 30 individuals from Tillamook County, from federal government to state and local representation, as well as folks connected in the schools that toured both Rockaway up to Wheeler and then also up into the river segment. Next slide, please. And we had a little get reacquainted party at the Tillamook Creamery at the Red Barn, which was really a wonderful gathering of community partners talking and learning together about the trail, the future trail. Next slide, please. This is everybody at that party saying thank you to those who are supporting the Samberry Trail here in Tillamook County. Next slide. And we built a lot of new relationships this last year. This is just a slide of a number of the community groups and local businesses that we built relationships with. Next slide, please. And what we really learned this last year, next slide, is that we are ready to build. And when I say ready to build, it means ready to plan and build, because you cannot build before you plan, and you also need to develop community relationships. So those are the three things that we really have been focusing on at the Samberry Trail so that we can have construction. So we've been doing a lot of work on these segments. Our priorities are advancing trail construction, building the movement and growing public support, building capacity as an organization, and raising critical funding. Tillamook County has been a part of that, and we thank you for that, for your support. Next slide, please. Next slide. So where are we looking to build trail first? Because this is 82 miles. It's very difficult terrain in some areas. So we are looking for segments where the neighbors are ready, where there's not a huge obstacles, and where there's funding available. So the Tillamook Creamery Path is an area that we're working on. We're hoping to start permitting this year with Tillamook County, and depending on financing, we could build this year or next year. Next slide, please. And then Bay City, there's not a line here on Bay City because we're not quite ready. This is a segment that we are investigating with the City Council of Bay City. There are not a lot of complications. There's no tunnels or trestles or bridges. It connects two important places, the Fish Peddler, which is a great business locally, and there's so the Port of Garibaldi right there at that port. There's some parking area. It's near Bay City, and then it would connect down to the Kilches Trail Network. Next slide, please. Rockaway Beach. So folks are aware here in Tillamook County that this has been going on for quite a while. The city is leading this effort to plan roughly 3 miles of trail that will go from the north end connecting the high school all the way down to the south end at Big City Tree Park. And so they have gotten a community paths grant, and that is moving forward in their planning stages. Next slide, please.
So the community of Wheeler, we've done a lot of guided hikes in Wheeler, and this year we're working with the City Council and the local landowners and Oregon Coast Scenic Railway, who will be putting in their own infrastructure in the city of Wheeler to develop about a half to a mile of trail in 2025. So that is our hope. Now, looking into the future, how far into the future, we don't know yet because we still have a lot of community building work to do outside of this little segment of Wheeler, and we have a lot of planning work to do. But if you'll go to the next slide, please. In the future, we hope to expand the Wheeler segment from just downtown north along Highway 53 behind Moeller, and possibly one day connecting to the old county road. Again, this is a long time in the future, but that's just a look of some of the things that we're hoping to work with our neighbors to be able to complete. Next slide, please. So to 2025, we will continue to do trail work parties, guided hikes, and more. In Tillamook County, we haven't done a lot of trail work parties, and part of this is because the Oregon Coast Scenic Railway takes care of that right-of-way. But we're going to be working with them and some community groups to do some trail work parties in the river segment this year. Next slide, please. Expanding volunteer leadership locally. So we do first aid, CPR training, other leadership development training courses, which primarily have been taking place in Washington County. In 2025, we're going to be doing more of that here in Tillamook County. Next slide. And of course, as always, as a nonprofit that is also responsible for raising the funds for trail construction, we'll be working on raising critical funding. What is new this year, which is the information that I provided to you, is that the Sambury Trail Foundation has hired a lobbyist, and we are going to the state legislature to ask the state legislature for $8 million to fund trail construction and planning. And so those construction dollars are going to support the projects that you saw today, as well as a project in Washington County. The funding would not go to the Sambury Trail Foundation. This funding would go directly to STIA, the intergovernmental agency, to manage the plans and the construction for those projects. And then, of course, in terms of raising critical funds, we'll continue to apply for grants. We appreciate your support, and we hope that we can count on your critical support for the foundation again in 2025. And we also put up here, as part of sort of raising critical funds, is that we navigate unknowns together. The Salmonberry is more than a trail. It is literally some people's backyards. It is a connection to the local community. It's a connection to local businesses. And so this is a trail that needs to be built in collaboration. Next slide, please. So our legislative efforts, so we're working with partners on recreational immunity. We just testified yesterday. There was a hearing on the recreational immunity bill. We're pretty positive that it will pass this year, it looks like. And then, of course, raising awareness and educating legislators, securing funding for construction. Next slide, please. We get together for Lobby Day in Salem. This year it's March 10th. Hopefully some of you might join us. We'll be lobbying on recreational immunity and also on funding for trails and funding for ODOT's active transportation funds. Next slide, please. Next slide. I think we're almost at the end. Yeah, and next slide. That's one of the work parties. This is one of the guided hikes on a trestle, which we don't do anymore. Next slide, please, because of liability. And this, I think I'm just going to end here, and happy to answer any questions, is a quote from one of our supporters area that really just sums up the heart and soul of the Salmonberry and the communities it runs through. Yeah, so... And I'm happy to answer any questions and really appreciate all of your support for the trail. And yeah.
Thank you, Caroline. Appreciate that. So I sit on the intergovernmental agency on behalf of Tillamook County, and I also sit on the foundation on behalf of Tillamook County. So I'm just super excited about where this has come from, where it is going. I can see the future where we're walking on the trail, and it's not very far away. So that is very exciting. So my fellow commissioners, colleagues, questions or comments?
Thank you for being here with us, and thank you for your excellent work on the trail. I share Commissioner Scar's excitement about, we may not see the entire trail complete in our lifetimes, but certainly there will be chunks of it. There will be sections of it. And I think it'll be a wonderful benefit to our community. It'll certainly be attractive to visitors, but I'm really thinking of us, like for us to be able to use it, for our children to be able to use it, to have safe places to ride bikes, for the kids in Rockaway Beach to be able to use the trail to go to and from school instead of on 101. There will be tremendous benefit in our community. And I acknowledge what you said about neighbors being ready, and that there are engineering difficulties, there are fundraising challenges, there are places where neighbors have serious concerns that you're working on. And so there's all of that. That's all the good work ahead, but it's very exciting that it's really coming together. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo both of what you said. I also am very grateful that there's going to be a focus on Tillamook County segments. I think we spoke of that over coffee, and I think that that's great for us. It helps us get support within our community. Having interconnectivity between our communities, great, safe for kids to ride bikes and all of us to get out there. So I appreciate the work you're doing.
We appreciate you. Thank you so much. Let us know if you ever want to go on a hike.
Okay. Thank you, Caroline. Appreciate you being with us today. Okay, we will move on to our legislative and administrative agenda with item 6. Consideration of order in the matter of the reappointment of members to the 4-H and Extension Service District Budget Committee. And we have Chrissy Dixon, the Office Manager for Oregon State University. Good morning, Chrissy.
Good morning. Well, we would like Becky Heimroll and Lisa Greiner to be reappointed. They both agreed. And it sounds like I was not here for it, but it sounds like both of them stepped in midterm for somebody else. So they were both shocked that they were both coming up again. So they both jumped on board real quick and said they would love to be part of the process again.
Wonderful. We always appreciate community members who are willing to volunteer and be part of important functions. So we appreciate their willingness to serve. Commissioners, questions or comments?
I'm fully supportive.
Perfect. Commissioner Fournier? Okay, excellent. I think we are ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move approval of order number 25-011 and 4-H Extension Service order number 25-001 in the matter of the reappointment of members to the 4-H and Extension Service District Budget Committee.
And a second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Chrissy.
Thank you very
We'll
much.
look forward to seeing you all at the Budget Committee meetings.
Nice and easy.
I know. Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to item number 7, which is consideration of a contract for goods with CarMax for the Emergency Management Department vehicle purchase of a 2023 Dodge Durango. Randy Thorpe, Director of Emergency Management.
He was in here.
Out in the hall with CAO.
Okay, just walked out into the hall. Well, there you have it. I understand there was some concern from CarMax related to our contracting and how they wanted or didn't want to interact with us. So I'm going to assume that may be what we're continuing to get the latest news on. Bill, would you like to share anything
Well,
related to
I
that?
I saw yesterday an email came in, Commissioner Scar, about CarMax didn't want to sign our standard form contract, and I opined I was okay if they just signed the purchase order. And then I saw, and Sean apparently had,
No, actually, we can postpone this item. That's what I was.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
all right.
All right, sorry. Okay, so for those of you watching online, thank you. You have a preview for when that item will come back. But we are postponing number 7 as we work with CarMax. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 8, which is discussion and consideration of the adoption of a revised Tillamook County non-represented exempt 2024-2025 salary schedule effective February 19th, 2025. This one goes with the next one as well. So I'm going to go ahead and ask that we just sort of talk about this all in one fell swoop. So we've read the first one into the record, and then we can go ahead and have our conversation and make our decisions from there. So we'll go ahead and read number 9 into the record, which is consideration of a personnel requisition for a new regular full-time chief medical legal death investigator for the district attorney's office. And we have Aubrey Olson, our district attorney, with us today. And I just want to give a quick preface for this conversation. We did have a conversation at the board briefing regarding the challenges that Tillamook County is facing as our ME of 40-some years will be retiring, and the need to figure out what is the proper solution for Tillamook County at this time. So I look forward to the kind of update that we have here today and discussing what solution has been worked out with the DA's office and HR and how we might move this forward. So thank you for being here. And Aubrey, I think I'm handing it to you first.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Scar. It's pretty much the solution that we discussed at the last hearing, which is to have, or not hearing, excuse me, I'm in court all the time, so everything's a hearing to me. At the last meeting, which is to create the position of a chief medical legal death investigator. That is recommended by the state medical examiner's office. I did present at the last board briefing the medical examiner improvement work group summary, which talks all about the problems that Oregon's medical examiner system has faced over the years and has gotten even worse with our opioid epidemic and our rising numbers of overdoses. Basically, the chief medical legal death investigator is able to perform the majority of the functions that the medical examiner currently performs, such as going out onto scenes and doing a lot of the follow-up investigation. Ultimately, the actual medical examiner, the licensed physician, they are required to be, under current law, a licensed physician. They are really only required to review all of the investigative materials and medical records and things like that are provided by the medical legal death investigator and be able to certify death as required by law. There are some situations where the state medical examiner would ultimately certify that death. Situations where maybe it's a homicide case and the deceased person is actually sent off to the state medical examiner's office for an autopsy. That's a situation where our county medical examiner may respond to the scene and conduct a preliminary investigation, but then pass it off, and it's actually the state ME that signs the death certificate. With a medical legal death investigator, the county ME wouldn't have to do any of that. The MDI, for short, would actually be able to perform quite a large amount of those functions. That has been, as we've talked to Dr. Betlinski, our outgoing ME, current and outgoing ME, he's done this job for 45 years, and literally my entire life. It's just
That's
weird
an
to me.
impactful thought, isn't it?
It's weird. It's a little weird. Anyways, he has actually on his own been trying to recruit his replacement for the last 2 years. Because I knew like one of the first orders of business when I became DA was, Aubrey, we need to talk. I need to retire. And so I know we've sat down with Commissioner Bell, our liaison, several times at this point, to discuss the strategy for moving forward. Dr. B has not had any success in finding someone who might want to take over. He's had people do ride-alongs, for lack of a better term. I come from a law enforcement world, so that's what we call it. And just people aren't interested. They're not interested in getting called out at 3 o'clock in the morning, responding to a scene way up Highway 6, having to actually deal with a horrific scene involving a deceased person. A medical legal death investigator would be able to perform all of that work, would be able to go to a scene or direct it through part-time. We do have three part-time medical legal death investigators who work for our local law enforcement agencies. I can discuss the problems that we've had with that and reasons that the state ME doesn't actually recommend that those part-timers be law enforcement, but for now, that is what we have. So they are able, if they're already on duty, they are able to respond to a scene and at least conduct preliminary investigation and call Dr. B to see if he needs to actually make the scene or not. The idea behind the chief MDI position is that person would be the call versus the ME. That person, the MDI, would get the call from law enforcement in the field, make the decision to respond to the scene or not. If they do need to respond to the scene, they would collect all of the data, all the information, and then follow up later In our county, we have a contract with Watts Funeral Home, so all bodies would be transported to Watts from a scene, and there is a lot of follow-up investigation conducted at Watts. Currently, Dr. B does all that follow-up. The MDI would be able to do all of that. They'd be able to do investigations with a personal physician of a deceased person and family members, things like that, to help really unravel and determine why a person died. And yeah, all those things Dr. B doesn't actually need to do himself. So that is where we're at, is we are wanting to, we have finalized the numbers. I worked with Rachel worked with Troop to get the numbers that are comparable to other counties. Our job position, I will say this, I did mention this at the board briefing, but the job position that I am proposing has a secondary role as a district attorney investigator. I'm not sure that the chief MDI would have enough work to fulfill 40 hours a week. Our state medical examiner, Dr. Hurst, believes there is. I mean, he reviews all 36 counties. He oversees the entire medical examiner program throughout all the counties. And because all of the county MEs or district MEs, as they're referenced in statute, are appointed ultimately by the state ME. So he does have oversight of that program. And in reviewing all of that, he says if we're following the guidelines for the national standards for medical examiner and death investigations, that he believes we do have the numbers to support a full-time position. But I'm not sure, just based on what I've seen, and you know, our budget does include the salary or pay for Dr. B. He's currently paid at a rate of only $135 an hour. I don't feel positive that we would be able to get, or optimistic at all, that there is any licensed physician in the country that would be willing to work for $135 an hour, even if it's just reviewing paperwork and, you know, signing death certificates. So there is that. But the state ME does believe there's enough work. I think there may not be, but I do have an absolute need for assistance in my office with the district attorney investigator. Several other DA's offices do have this position. A lot of them have it as a full-time position. I don't have enough work to support a full-time DA investigator, but definitely part-time. It's actually a position I had been considering proposing to the board since I've become DA. It's just one of those things that, you know, I need more hours in a day. Can we please find a way to get 30 hours in a day? Or, you know, find a way to not have to sleep. But that is something that I need, that I'm willing to dive into. If you have more questions, I want to be, you know, conserve time as much as possible, but that's what the position considers. If the chief MDI position does in fact take 40 hours a week, then that's it. I don't have much room. I don't get to ask that person to do DA investigative work. But in the event their MDI duties don't require 40 hours a week, then we could ask them to also perform some DA investigator work. I have the idea I have in mind is it's about a 75-25 split, 75% of the time being MDI work and 25% of the time being DA investigative work. That is purely a guess.
Thank you, Aubrey. Just to add on to her presentation, so there's two pieces here that the county needs to institute, if you will, to cover what Dr. B is currently doing. One is the medical examiner role, and the other is the chief MDI role. This is a bit of a new strategy than what we're currently doing. So before you today is the adoption of the pay table with Troop's recommendation at range 11 on the non-rep pay table, followed by the recruitment that is the second agenda item if approved by you today. Secondarily, a medical examiner position is proposed to be filled by an independent contractor, which would be on an as-needed basis for whatever roles need to be completed by the medical examiner that cannot be completed by the chief MDI. There's an RFP that's currently being drafted that Isabel and Aubrey are working on, but it is not yet on the street. So that's where we are in the process. And did you have any comments on the cost, what we're currently paying Dr. Bentlinski with what the cost for the chief MDI full-time position and coupled with the medical examiner position?
I looked at, I do have numbers from Dr. B. I will say this, Dr. B has told us privately in meetings that he actually does not bill us for all of his hours. And we've actually asked him to be more diligent about that to make sure he's accurately. He considers this like his retirement thing. He does it out of the goodness of his heart. It's just something that fills his time. So I did want to preface that I think it's necessary. But for 2020, 21, it was $51,070.72. 21-22 was $52,794.04. 22-23 was $49,089.17. 23-24 was much lower for some odd reason. 23-24 was $38,993.04. And for the first quarter of 24-25, $5,244. So that is just Dr. B's rate. It does include his mileage, which is paid at the federal rate. I believe he does bill us for all his mileage for when he goes out to scene. I do know the last year billed, he did take a couple of vacations where we relied on those part-time MDIs with law enforcement to handle stuff. That created significant challenges for us. It also, these figures do not include any time that I actually spend, which is a considerable amount of time because the current practice is to submit law enforcement is required to draft pretty lengthy reports related to their death investigations, and they forward all of those to my office for review. So that is something that I would no longer have to do. The chief MDI would review those reports, would collaborate with any first responders to get their reports and that sort of thing. Yes.
So what was that average annual? You had in that
I have
last,
to do the math on
okay.
the average. I'm gonna say just 50,000.
Okay.
I see 51, 52, 49, and then the one off year where we actually relied on part-timers was lower. I think that seems to be an anomaly. So I would ask that we average the 3 years, the 2021, 21, 22, 22, 23. Those are the closest in numbers. So I would say it's about 50,000.
Okay.
Do you want me to run the math or calculator?
No, I think that's close enough. Yeah, so we're paying about 50,000 for current
For
services.
the medical examiner,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, which is most of what the cost is. And so the range on the proposed pay table would be a base salary, not with overhead, of 71,000 to about 98,000, depending on where the candidate was placed on the pay table, plus the cost of travel, plus the cost of the medical examiner through the contract. So an estimate of those combined, and if we're looking, I'll just be conservative and say 100,000 for the salary, plus another 10, 20,000 for a contractor. I don't know how much we're looking there, but
I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I did do a brief rundown of the numbers, and at $38,993 for 23-24, just dividing, into 52 weeks per hour. Granted, this number does include mileage. That's
Mhm.
only like 5.5 hours a week,
okay.
which I find a little surprising. Especially after talking with Dr. B and Dr. Hurst. I know that Dr. B had 120 cases in 23-24. I know the numbers were higher in years before that, but that would be over 2 cases a week on average. So that's a very short, very small amount of time. Just getting to the scene alone, if you're going from the middle of the county up to Nehalem, you're looking at 45 minutes of drive time.
But that would be the chief MDI at this point, right? Not the medic.
It would be. I'm just simply saying that Dr. B reported in just doing the math on Dr. B's hours alone, showing him doing, 5.5 hours per week seems really low to me. And I don't know, because we're having to go out, do an RFP for a new medical examiner, and these rates are for Dr. B, he hasn't asked for an increase since I think 2014. So these are outdated numbers. They were not included in the market study. So I would anticipate the number for an actual ME being close to the same, because an ME is a licensed physician still has to review all the MDI's work. They still have to actually certify the death. The MDI cannot do that. They just do all all of the investigative and background work. And so if the MDI, Dr. B anticipates, because we've asked him, that's why these numbers are strange to me, because we've asked him how many hours. I know Commissioner Bell and I sat and talked with Dr. B about this specific issue and said, how many hours do you spend if you were just in an administrative role, if you didn't go to the scene, if you didn't do all this follow-up, if you didn't go to WADS, if all you did was review paperwork and sign? And didn't he say about 10 hours a week?
Mhm.
He estimated about 10 hours a week. So to look at his numbers and see he's billing us for 5.5, it's like, that doesn't add up. So that's why I think we're probably going to be safest if we say we can anticipate in today's costs, somebody saying, I mean, most of the time, most of the MEs around, because it's a very part-time position, 10 hours a week. A lot of these people are retired, or maybe they do have a private practice. They're not going to charge. I don't think it'd be reasonable to charge their office visit. What's an office visit? $300 an hour? I don't even know.
So what would be your estimate for just the ME work? If we had a
I would say
full-time,
50,000 a year is fair on just the ME work. In today's numbers, with if they give 5 hours a week at $135 an hour.
so I would say conservatively, you're looking at a $150,000 program.
Thank you. Questions and comments, commissioners?
Yes. First, I want to say I'm supportive of you having an investigator like this, and I know that we need to be on this because of the law. We have to have an ME. So my questions are with Dr. Hurst, if we get a DMI, say July 1st, is he willing to handle the ME portion until we find an ME? Because what happens if we don't find an ME, but we fund this position?
Under statute, and if you bear with me, it's chapter 146 covers all the death investigations, but the statute does cover vacancies for an ME. And the first person in line to do the medical examiner work is the local health officer, which in our
Latest leadership team meeting, Marlene Putman said that the local health officer is looking to retire, and they're going to be looking to fill that position soon. And so I remember commenting to her that we needed to connect on that issue, because the second person in line to handle, to be the ME if the local health officer is vacant, is me. I have no interest in doing that. I'm not qualified to do, I would handle what is legally required, but I don't have the qualifications to actually examine a body. With my current workload, I just simply do not have the time to be going out to scenes, to be handling all this background. I'm already behind. I've been behind since I started, so I can't imagine having to take on that extra responsibility. I believe there is an avenue within statute that the state ME's office would assist. In speaking with Dr. Hurst, they have always been willing to assist. They also have issues with staffing. And so there are concerns there that we would fall even further behind and be even lower than.
I'm not even considering not getting an ME. I'm saying the reality is you may not get one, and I wanted to know what the status was. I know it's a mess, and almost every county is dealing with issues with this. I just spoke to the Lincoln County Police Chief this morning about their counties in disarray over this as well. So that was one of the questions, and I just wanted to know what the backup was if we don't get the ME position filled. So, right. So what I'm saying is we still there's something that's going to happen. We're not going to just explode. It's going to be, there is a path while we're trying to fill that position, correct?
correct.
Okay.
You might see me a lot more confident for sure.
Probably a very.
And I had, my other question was, you already answered, I asked what other duties the DMI would be doing if they're not that busy, because I agree with you. It's, one of the questions I have related to that is, do you see a difference in your day-to-day investigations? In other words, a police officer or deputy shows up, it's a 95-year-old deceased person with a DNR. I mean, how are you using this person? If it's 3 o'clock in the morning, are you calling this person out for a death like that that's unsuspicious and expected?
Part of the MDI program and part of, and we can't, I don't even have
an idea of what numbers would be at this point, but the idea is to increase the number of part-time people in the field. And I envision having my chief MDI oversee that program. There really should be 5 to 7 part-time MDIs that are available to respond at all hours of the night. That way, the chief position, who is a full-time position, doesn't have to go to every single scene. Because that person, as a county position, they would get benefits, they would have time off, they would have weekends. I wouldn't expect them to be on call every single day, at every single hour. They would never have a life. There'd be no balance, work-life balance. So right now we do have the 3 law enforcement positions, although they're not on call. They're not going to be paid overtime. One of them is a city officer, so they only have jurisdiction in the small city of Tillamook. So if that's the only person working and the death is in Nehalem, well, my chief MDI has to go, or I do.
So,
But to follow up, continue answering your question, is somebody like that, the idea is that I want to make sure somebody with training in handling death investigations is going to be on every scene, even the scene you just described. Because how do we know there wasn't an elder abuse situation if we don't investigate it thoroughly? You'd be surprised how many, and in talking with my counterparts who actually have gone with chief MDIs, they've actually uncovered what they thought was just your routine death investigation. Somebody just died in their sleep. Oh, actually, there's, somebody wasn't caring for their 95-year-old grandmother like they were supposed to do, and there might be a criminal mistreatment case there. So there is a need to actually make sure that the investigations are handled properly and someone with the right training is on the scene.
okay, so barring those, we still have to find those volunteers. So barring that, we should also be including possibly overtime in this budget.
Well,
Also, are you considering a vehicle at some point for this person? Are you gonna pay mileage? What's the?
oh, that is one of the concerns. Is currently my plan is to we're going to open the position to see who's interested. And I would ask the person, our office has never budgeted a vehicle. We've never asked for one. My predecessor was like, you don't ever want to do that. It's a nightmare. So I trust a lot of what my predecessor told me, especially when it comes to nightmares. So I don't really want to have to deal with that. So if a person is willing and able to provide their own vehicle and we can pay their mileage, that's ideal, especially considering if we have volunteers who are going to most scenes, they're going to most of the scenes. They're already on duty. I'm thinking maybe, fire department personnel, EMT personnel, people who are already out responding. And then our MDI would really only have to respond to WADS, which is walking distance from the courthouse. All the other county employees are required to get to the courthouse on their own. And I know a lot of county employees are, drive short distances. Maybe we go over to the sheriff's office or other county buildings, but it's all pretty short distance. And so we use our personal vehicles, or if we go to trainings, we use our personal vehicles and we request reimbursement. That's the preferred method. If we have a situation where we're having trouble recruiting a position because the people don't want to provide the use of their own vehicle, I'm going to have to come back before you.
Okay.
We're going to have further discussion.
And finally, like I said, I do support this. I mean, I always thought I think it'd be great for the DA's office to have somebody who can also do other investigations if they have the time. I think that would help with your caseload. I am just very cognizant of the fact that we're in a budget issue here and we've been asking people to slow roll on hiring. That said, this is a different, unique situation, but I just want to say that's a little bit of it's a big concern of mine is we've had other departments kind of slow roll, and then this came up because Dr. B's finally leaving us, unfortunately. So I understand that there's an urgency to this too, but so I appreciate.
I'm happy to chime in as well too on just more examples of why even the chief MDI, even as the role of chief MDI with that secondary role of DA investigator, would be able to do more with even death investigations and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but one example from just last week, and I won't give too many details because it is still considered an active investigation. However, we did have a drug overdose death. The city investigated it. There was a serious need for a search warrant. We investigate, my policy is to investigate every single drug overdose case as a homicide. We rule out a homicide. Most cases where there's a death investigation, you're ruling out a homicide. You don't just go in and go like, oh, well, it looks like natural causes. No, you go in and you treat it. as a potential homicide investigation. And you turn over all those stones and then you conclude, okay, it's not homicide. And so in a drug overdose situation, drugs are illegal, folks. They've always actually been illegal. They were never legalized. Measure 110 did not legalize them. I like to point that out. But delivering drugs to another person has always been a felony level crime, even in Oregon. And so when you deliver drugs to someone and that person subsequently dies from an overdose, we treat it as a homicide. It is a criminal case.
Microphone.
Oh, okay. So we do treat it as, there's a criminal investigation at best. So in the one last week, we needed to be able to get a search warrant in order to conduct a search of particular property. And even though it was the decedent's property, there might be a privacy interest for other people. So we needed a search warrant. And I was working with the city police to try to get that search warrant, but we were up against timelines as far as because we needed certain information for the state ME's office to agree to perform an autopsy. Ultimately, we did not succeed. The city police was never able to actually get us a search warrant. There was some miscommunication. I won't go into any more detail than that, but ultimately we did not get a search warrant in the time we needed to get one. So we released the body. We were not able to get an autopsy. We're still investigating that case for potential criminal charges, but I was very disappointed. And I thought this is a great example. Had I had a chief MDI who was trained also as a DA investigator, I would have had that person write the search warrant. They would have gotten the search warrant. They would have done it. And it wouldn't have been a conflict of interest because they're a witness in the case all the way through. And they would have been able to do that work and coordinate all of that and save I and my chief a ton of time, and it would have been done. And we would have been able to handle that properly. Now, we might end up with nothing on that case.
Thank you, Aubrey. Commissioner Bell, questions or comments?
Thank you. Well,
Madam Chair, if you could give Sean the opportunity, she was
She's no
carrying.
longer there.
Oh, she did put her hand down, but she was listed as carrying the pay table. I just didn't know if she had any comments before the
She's
board.
no longer there.
Oh, she's gone. Okay.
She's gone. Yeah. So I was going to do that, but she may have had a conflict. Maybe that's why she had her hand raised. So she is no longer on the call.
thank you. Well, Aubrey, I am grateful to you for the work that you've been doing on this for a long time now, for a couple of years. And it's a big problem to solve. And I think we have been, I'm certain that we have been very fortunate to have the benefit of Dr. B for 45 years. And everything that means, because now we're really talking about developing an entirely new program because no one else in their right mind is willing to do what Dr. B has been doing. And he's been trying and trying and trying to find somebody to do it. And so now we have to go find an entirely different model. And we're talking about spending 3 times as much at minimum. And I think the numbers are skewed because he just hasn't billed us. And so we don't have a clear picture of how much time he's actually spending. But currently he's doing everything. And now we're talking about finding multiple people to do what he's been doing. And I think it's the right model. I've sat in the meetings with you, with the state ME, and talked to other jurisdictions about how they're doing it. I think it's the right model. I think you need a part-time investigator, so I totally support that. And you and I have both, to Commissioner Fournier's earlier question, you and I have both leaned into Dr. B a little bit and said, well, if we get the chief ME, if we get the medical death investigator, would you still be the signer off, or would you still be the contractor? And he hasn't given us a hard no, but his wife has given me a hard no, but he hasn't. And he says that he thinks it'd be boring, that he doesn't think he's necessarily interested in just doing the paperwork. So clearly we do need an ME. I'm concerned about the idea of having the medical death investigator be an 8 to 5 employee who doesn't go out in the field nights or weekends, who's not on call. In one of those meetings, we were talking about that person being on call. So I don't know that, I don't know how that should look, and maybe HR is going to help you with that. But if we had the MDI being an 8 to 5 employee who doesn't go out in the field, and then we had to backfill with a bunch more MDIs who are the ones who go out in the field, then suddenly we have a whole big team full of people.
No. It is an on-call position. It's not strictly 8 to 5. It would be, it's like the deputy DAs. I mean, technically, it says 8 to 5. The courthouse is open 8 to 5. We have court. But the chief MDI would not necessarily have court unless they were considered a witness in a case, and we would just give them a subpoena to be there. But there is an on-call responsibility. I just meant, I realized I was misleading. I meant that they don't need to be 24/7 available. They have to. I know I looked at like the Clatsop County position, and it requires them to be available 24/7. Well, we have to be able to give them. I think they have to be able to have set days off. Like you get these days off. Of course, I mean, my position, I don't. I'm available all the time. I get calls all the time at all hours, and you just adjust. And that's just how it has to be, where there's some adjustment and flexibility. So the person who would take that position would have to be willing to be flexible with their time. So it would be a flexible schedule.
Okay, thank you. I think we need to do this, and I'm worried about where the money comes from, and we need to do it. So that's where I'm at.
Perfect, thank you. No, and I agree with my colleagues. We're in a position here where we have to do this. There is not an option. We have been exceptionally lucky to have Dr. B, as everyone has said, which has kept us from having to face this. I first started hearing issues just at AOC, in fact, from other counties before it came to our own county. And it is a statewide problem that various models are being worked to try to solve it, and this is definitely one of them that seems to fit with what we're doing here. I share the concern of finding an additional $150,000 in our budget at a time when we are not looking to add to our budget, and it does mean that it will definitely be a challenging budget cycle to do that. Do we have a sense of how soon this might be hired? Is this going to be in the next budget that we are finding it? Is it in this budget that we need to dig in and find $150,000? Or obviously it'd be a small slice of that for this year. Help me with the timing, please.
So today, if approved by you, is the personnel requisition. So that is the trigger for HR to begin the recruitment process. So presumably this is on the street within 2 weeks. We haven't talked about how long to recruit for, but I think it's realistic that an employee could be hired before the end of the fiscal year, but we're probably pushing the end of the fiscal year. So I think the brunt of this cost is certainly going to be in next fiscal year. We're not looking at $150,000 for this fiscal year. So certainly the conversations are before us in April and May for the hearings.
And I'd like to chime in if that's okay. The idea is that we would get a chief MDI as soon as possible. That person could work with Dr. B to become trained, and then as that person is trained, Dr. B would transition out. We'd also be running hopefully getting this soon, the RFP for a new ME that would be able to take over starting July 1. It would be, ideally, we would have our chief MDI fully trained and running so that when a new ME comes in, we've got this program in place. As the chief MDI takes over and is handling more cases, once Dr. B helps them with some of the I imagine at least a month for training, then Dr. B could transition to just an administrative role for his last couple of months on his contract, which would actually save us a little bit of money, depending on how he decides to bill us. So we would be wanting to pay some of it now, but it wouldn't be the full $150,000. I remember at the last budget meeting I went to, I'm not gonna lie, this was a little confusing to me about if you didn't already, how the county managed to balance itself. I know there was a talk about if you had budget savings between, for the end of, the first half of the fiscal year, don't count on it. But I know that I had a vacancy for a DDA 1, which is the same range, the same pay. I did have a vacancy for 6 months for the first half of the fiscal year. We filled that position effective January. I've also had a vacancy for a legal assistant. There were 3 months in the first half of the fiscal year, and we're going into month 2. We filled the position, but it's vacant again and has been for over a month now. So, about roughly 5 months of vacancy for a legal assistant position. So there is, depending on however the county calculated its budget, I would say I had budget savings in that I had vacancies. So the idea, especially if the rate of pay is the same, then hopefully for at least this budget cycle, we're not spending more this budget cycle. And so that additional money would be for the next budget fiscal year.
Thank you. That's helpful because, yeah, if we're talking about 2 months of this position and we have 5 months of a legal assistant that was unfilled in the second half of the fiscal year, it should have essentially, and I'm sorry, Sean looks like she had to step off. She would have been able to probably say yes, would have a no budget impact in this fiscal year. And it puts us then, as we are looking at our budget for next fiscal year, to identify that additional 150,000 that we have, estimated it
I
at.
also haven't spent some of the expenses I budget for. It's hard with my budget. I have to ask for
Sure.
certain expenditures when I'm anticipating trials set, and I think I might need expert witnesses and things like that. And there's no way to be precise about it. I may or may not need it. I know that I haven't spent all that money, so there's at least a little bit left.
A little more
over.
offset there, sure.
I'm very stingy. I hold my purse very tightly. So I don't like having to ask for more money for this, but I realize, realistically, the ME just falls, there's a lot of counties that the ME, all of this doesn't even fall under the DA's office. For some reason, it's just always been shoved into our budget. And so here I am.
When you've seen one county, you've seen one county. And in our case, it falls under your budget. It's interesting, definitely across the state, to see how things are set up. Colleagues, do we have more questions or comments for Aubrey or for Rachel?
No.
Okay, and we do not have Sean with us, and I apologize. Like I said, she had her hand up in the midst of conversation, and she was carrying the pay table portion of this. So I think what we would do is, we've had the opportunity to have discussion. If there is no more questions on either items 8 or 9, I will go back to item 8, which I've already read into the record, and ask if we have a motion.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the adoption of a revised Tillamook County non-represented exempt 2024-2025 salary schedule effective February 19, 2025.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, and item 9, which I've also read into the record, is there any further conversation related to item 9?
I would say based on the salary savings, I feel a little bit better about this fiscal year at least.
Okay, perfect. So with that, I would entertain a motion if we have one.
Madam Chair, I move approval of a personnel requisition for a new regular full-time chief medical legal death investigator for the district attorney's office.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. We appreciate your work and the opportunity to have robust discussion today. I think this is definitely a complicated issue, and appreciate that, as you have said, not every DA has to deal with it. We appreciate that you are and you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Okay, we will move on to item number 10, which is consideration of modification number 5 to professional services agreement number 4810 with OTAC Inc. for the design services for 3 landslide slump locations, East Creek Road, Hadley Road, and Old Wheeler Moeller Road project. Chris Leidy, Public Works. Good morning, Chris.
Morning, Commissioners. So these are 2015 storm events. We have a few yet to polish off, including 2 bridges that ODOT is managing, and East Creek and Kilch's House, as well as Hadley Road. So we're closing in on the completion of our 2015 storm events. The contract with OTAC was to do design of those 3 slides. Old Wheeler Moeller is done. East Creek is a retaining wall. It's off of Upper Nestucca Road. This one ran into environmental issues concerning birds and a few other things dealing with the Forest Service, who owns property immediately adjacent to it. Total contract value of this was for the design of all 3 projects, including the construction effort associated with Old Wheeler Moeller. This modification is for the construction components to build the engineering construction in order to build a wheeler mower. We do like to have technical consultants out there to review the technical components. So if this project does, or this modification increases that price to account for the engineering design, the engineering construction management component, that brings total cost for the three projects under modification number 5, $647,593. We also extended the contract term out to December 31st of 2025, so the end of this year. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Questions, colleagues? It's your liaison. I was trying to
Yeah, I
think.
have no questions.
No, I
Okay.
do.
I do not either. I'm happy to entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move approval of modification number 5 to professional services agreement number 4810 with OTAC Inc. for the design services for 3 landside slump locations, East Creek Road, Hadley Road, and Old Wheeler Moeller Road.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, moving on to item number 11, consideration of change order number 1 to contract number 6644, prevailing wage rate contract for construction with HP Civil, Inc. for the Big Trout Three Rivers Bridge temporary replacement project. Chris Laity.
So Big Trout is a temporary bridge, as you are well aware of. It was built the end of November and December of last year. In that process, the design of that was a original consulting engineer had been working on a permanent solution, had come up with a design and said basically build a bridge in this box. Associated with that, the lump sum cost of design, construct the bridge. But with that is they need to build the road approaches to get to the bridge. So in the original concept to build the bridge in this box, the original consulting engineer identified a quantity of material for rock in order to come up to the top of the bridge. The quantities of rock were quite a bit lower, significantly lower than what was actually built out there and needed to be built out there in order to get to the height of the bridge. So what this change order is for is to accommodate the actual rock. These are based on the tickets that were received from the gravel pits. So actual quantity of material. The increased cost is $41,544.05, which brings their total contract value up to almost $680,000.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments, Commissioner?
I don't have any.
No.
Yeah, when you actually go to build something, somehow it's never exactly quite what you thought it was going to be, and that's whether it's in your home or apparently whether it's out building a bridge. So I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move approval of change order number 1 to contract number 6644, prevailing rate contract for construction with HP Civil, Inc. for the Big Trout Three Rivers Bridge temporary replacement.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Chris. We now have an unscheduled item from you, which is consideration of a personnel requisition for a new regular full-time shop supervisor position for the Public Works Department. Chris Laity.
So I've been employed with the county for approximately 7.5 years. And in that time frame, I have hired almost every single one of our road staff. I've hired every one of our admin staff, and I've hired 2/3 of our engineering staff in the short time I've been here. We're working through the process, and I've also hired 2 road foremen of the 2. And then we are continuing to see, the upper level leadership retirement. Going through this process is looking at doing a reevaluation of the organizational, the fundamental chart, and the shop superintendent is one that is identified as something that we need in order to install some middle management leadership. This would be an internal request only. We do have several qualified candidates that would fit the bill. And this is for a position it has not been budgeted for. However, there is adequate funds to support this position. This would not increase the total number of mechanics. It would instead take one of the mechanics and increase the pay for that. So it's a brand new position, but it doesn't increase the total number of people in the department.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
No, I've discussed this with Rachel and Chris a little bit, so I agree with it. I'm in favor.
I am too. It also makes sense to me. And Chris, just for people who might be watching, could you briefly tell us how this, you have money in the budget for this and how it doesn't impact the general fund?
So the road department is not funded by the general fund. We receive no property taxes. We also receive no state timber taxes. We do receive state gas tax and state highway trust fund, which includes your gas tax, includes your motor vehicle registration fees. And when you take 50% of all the properties in Tillamook County, where the tax statement goes elsewhere, that means we're missing a significant portion of our potential revenue because those vehicles are not registered in the county. We receive money from cutting on the Siuslaw. So Public Works receives federal timber dollars and the general fund receives state timber dollars. So really, truly, our revenue is split. We also receive 30% of the TLT funds that has to go for roads. So the 70-30 split that we continue to talk about, the commissioners in the past have dedicated that fund to do that. What that has allowed us to do is essentially bring our staffing effort up to approximately we were around 2006. So we started with a high of 50. We dropped down to 25-ish. And then our low point with actual people employed was 17 people. So we're bringing ourselves back up to about where we were back in 2006. So this is allowing us to catch up. So again, the funding from the general fund and the road department are completely separate.
Thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And just for those who may not understand, that's actually required by state law. We do not have the option, even if we had an overabundance of property taxes, which we do not, but if we did, we're actually not allowed to use it on roads. So it's one of when they put together funding mechanisms for states and counties and the federal government, all of that, things were sort of sliced and diced as to how each section of government would be funded, and roads have their very own funding mechanisms and are not allowed to step into the general fund. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, for asking that question. Okay, are there any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move approval of a personnel requisition for a new regular full-time shop supervisor position for the Public Works Department.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Chris. Okay, we'll move on to item 12, which is making words up today. Consideration of change order number 1 to contract number 6536, contract for general services with Don G. Averill Recycling, Inc. for the hauling of municipal waste, yard debris, and other materials from the Pacific City Transfer Station to the Tillamook Transfer Station project. Justin Weiss, Solid Waste Program Manager. Morning, Justin.
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me all right?
You can.
Fantastic. So yes, before you this morning, we have change order 1 to our agreement with Don G. Averill Recycling for our Pacific City Transfer Station hauling efforts. Garbage, cardboard, recyclable materials get hauled from Pacific City to Tillamook, where they're processed and then shipped over for final processing, recycling in the Portland area, Washington. Some things do go overseas. So it's a 5-year agreement. This is our first change order. We do have a slight increase in pricing. A lot of our solid waste contracts are tied to CPI, roughly 80%. So looking at inflation from this time in 24, we've got about a 3% increase, which does mirror kind of where we were at this time last year, about 3% across a lot of our contracts. So slight increase for hauling. Aaron Averill does not do a lot of double hauling, so most of our fees are going to be at that single price point of around $220. And we appreciate the good work they do. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but just a simple extension of our ongoing hauling efforts between transfer stations.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions or comments?
No questions. I'm supporting.
I am supportive also.
As am I. I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move approval of change order number 1 to contract number 6536, contract for general services with Don G. Averill Recycling, Inc. for the hauling of municipal waste, yard debris, and other materials from the Pacific City Transfer Station to the Tillamook Transfer Station.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 13, which is consideration of an order in the matter of the reappointment of a member to the Three Rivers Ranch Road District Board of Directors. Isabel Gilda, Administrative Analyst. Isabel.
Hi, I'm here, sorry.
That's
So
okay.
before you today is an order reappointing a member to the Three Rivers Ranch Road District Board of Directors. It's quite a mouthful. The Special Road District is located Big Trout Road in Hebel and was established in 1969. And the board of directors for the special district are the property owners within the special districts, and that falls under jurisdiction of Tillamook County and the reappointment of its members through the Board of Commissioners. So today we have Angel Crow. She's currently the treasurer secretary, and it's a volunteer. Again, people volunteer for these appointments. She was first appointed in 2021. For her first 3-year term, and this is her second 3-year term. And I'm looking for your approval for the reappointment.
Thank you. Comments or questions, commissioners?
As always, we just appreciate citizens stepping up and doing this.
100%.
Likewise, I'm grateful that Angel is willing to continue.
Perfect. I think we are ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move approval of order number 25-012 in the matter of the reappointment of a member to the Three Rivers Ranch Road District Board of Directors.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we will take the second unscheduled item, which is consideration of a letter of support to the United States Department of Agriculture Rural Development Grants Program for the North Coast Recreation District Legacy Pool Redevelopment Project, and I will carry this one. We received a request from the NCRD as they are putting forth a project to our congressional district under the congressionally directed spending opportunity that exists, and they were looking for a letter of recommendation. And I went ahead and took the liberty of putting it on the agenda. I know that we recently passed some funding for them and trusted that we would probably all be in support, but I'm certainly open for conversation if there is any. This is no funding from the county. It is simply our continued support for the importance of the NCRD pool project, and they're moving forward following the construction of the new pool with repurposing the area where the old pool existed.
I am fully supportive. I think they continue to have funding needs, and this is an appropriate way. They're going to have to continue seeking funding. So I'm fully supportive, and I think I don't remember the numbers that I saw, but it was remarkably expensive to decommission the old pool. So that's not funded yet.
You would think you could just fill it full of dirt and but no.
I'm supportive.
Okay, perfect. If there are no other discussion points, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move approval of a letter of support to the United States Department of Agriculture Rural Development Grants Program for the North Coast Recreation District Legacy Pool Redevelopment Project.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item 14, consideration of an order in the matter of calling a measure election to submit to the electors of the county the question of increasing the transient lodging tax from 10% to 14%. Rachel Haggerty, Chief Administrative Officer.
Last week, the board concluded a several-month-long process to approve an amendment to Ordinance 74 to increase the transient lodging tax from 10% to 14%. There were 2 town halls at the end of January, along with the official public hearing on January 29th and the final public hearing last week, followed by the board's adoption of the ordinance. The next step is to go through the process to put the ordinance to the ballot for the voters to approve because it's a tax. Before you today is the board order that does that. It states within here what the ballot title is, noticing requirements, and a summary of what would be on the ballot. So it is ready for consideration.
Thank you. Commissioner Bell, questions, comments?
I am supportive of this. I think we've had a lengthy, in-depth process. I appreciate folks who are here to make public comment, and we've heard hundreds of public comments, and we have pivoted as a result of the things we've heard. We've adjusted. We learned things from the people who talked to us about how this change would impact their short-term rentals or their lodging businesses. And so I think we've arrived at a place that we tried to find the middle ground, and we were responsive. So I feel good about the process, and ultimately what we're deciding now is to let the voters decide. You know, we're not deciding anything. We're not deciding to raise the tax. We're deciding to ask the voters to decide. So I feel particularly good about that.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank April and Janice for coming here today. I don't take this lightly. I think this is very important. I agree that the process, I felt like it was a fair process. I just want to mention this. One of the things is I'm very happy to hear for the first time, well, it's been starting since we started this process, of the public recognizing that the 70-30 split is probably a little outdated and needs to evolve. And I can just say, I'll say this again, I've been saying this every public meeting, tell your legislatures that, tell the governor that, tell people in Salem that you feel that way, because we are getting a lot of pushback to not do that. I'll say for myself, had we had the 50-50 split, it looked like it was going to work. We wouldn't be needing to do this. And so that's very important to recognize. And if it were to pass this year, which I'm doubtful, but I'm glad the conversations are happening, and having STR owners, restaurant owners, letting their membership, other membership of Orla and everybody else know that maybe we need to reconsider, that would be important. If we could do it, we would do it, trust us, and still be investing in our visitor industry like we do. And just to that one point too, Chris made a really good point. The fact that 50% of the tax slips go outside the county, we're not getting those registration dollars to help offset the damage to roads and stuff. So this is another way of, it's not perfect, it's not easy, it's another way of raising that revenue that we need from people that don't live here, and we can't capture it any other way. So I'm supportive.
Thank you. And I appreciate both of my colleagues' comments and share those. We have a budget challenge in front of us. The tools in front of us are limited, and we are exploring every single one of them that we have, but in an effort to work with our voters, to have our voters give us guidance on how they would like us to handle a budget shortfall. This is an opportunity for them to weigh in and tell us that either yes or no, they feel like the tourism industry can pay more or it can't. It should or it shouldn't. So this is an opportunity for us to engage with our voters, and like I said, they can let us know if they see this as the right solution or not the right solution. So, and I am super hopeful that the legislature will see their way clear to make a change to the transient lodging tax. That said, I unfortunately share the pessimism that I don't think we're going to get there. I'm hopeful. I continue to be hopeful. I've been hopeful every year in the last 5 years when a bill has been attempted to put forward to get the legislature to change it. This is, I think, maybe the second time it's even gotten as far as a committee that's saying it will have a hearing. So there's hope in that front. But Oregon Restaurant Lodging Association has made it very clear they will push a very big fight at the state level related to that. And so far, their fights at the state level have kept the change from occurring. So if the industry folks are interested in having a 50-50 split and not having another local tax, I really encourage them to call Orla, Oregon Restaurant Lodging Association, and talk with them about the ability to do a 50-50 split. Because right now, I would say that what stands between a 50-50 split and not is the lobbyists at the state level for your Oregon Restaurant Lodging Association. They make it very clear that this is something they hold as unchangeable. In many conversations that we have had, they have let us know they hold the 730 as unchangeable. So we would much prefer to go the other direction. We just don't have that within our control, and we have to take care of the very basic needs of our residents in our county. So I think, is there any further comments? I realize this is a big move. Anytime you put forward a tax measure, we don't do it lightly.
True. And thank you. Yeah, I would like to respond to something Commissioner Fournier said about the 50-50. If the 50-50 split were successful in this legislative session, we would be thrilled. And I had a conversation with the gentleman who bought Janice's business, who asked me, if the 50-50 split goes through, do you guarantee me that you commissioners would reverse this tax? And I said, well, I can't guarantee you anything for my colleagues, but what I did guarantee him is that we would talk about it. We would rather have the 50-50 split, but I share my colleagues' pessimism that it will happen this time. So, moving forward, we would all be glad to be wrong about that.
Agreed.
I would say that's true. Commissioners, I would entertain a motion if we've had full discussion.
Madam Chair, I move approval of order number 25-013 in the matter of calling a measure election to submit to the electors of the county the question of increasing the transient lodging tax from 10% to 14%.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 15, consideration of a memorandum of agreement regarding Oregon AFSCME Local number 2734 for step increases. Rachel Hegarty.
And Madam Chair, if I could take 15 and 16 together?
You absolutely may. Let me go ahead and read 16. So consideration of a memorandum of agreement regarding Teamsters Local 223 for step increases.
Thank you. The county has had a practice of moving or proceeding with step increases on employees' anniversary dates following a successful performance evaluation, and there's a desire to decouple those. We have, as you know, two collective bargaining agreements, one with Teamsters, one with AFSCME, that sets forth that process. And before you today is a brief memorandum of agreement executed by both union representatives to change their agreement that allows for employees to receive step increases without having to have that performance evaluation done beforehand. We're still doing those, but they're not going to hold up any step increases for employee raises if they're not completed in a timely manner. So they're both ready for consideration.
Thank you. And just to clarify, at this point, step increases are something that comes with the successful completion of a year of employment. It has never been contingent upon there being a positive evaluation. It's been contingent upon there being an evaluation completed. Is that correct?
That is correct. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think there is language that actually says a successful evaluation, but I'm not aware of any instances where someone has received a poor performance evaluation and not received a step increase by way of actually what we're doing.
Right, because that was my understanding, is that while it seems smart and what one would want to do is to tie a positive performance evaluation to a step increase, but in fact, step increases per the union agreements, if I were to understand correctly, are for the completion of a year and not for the completion of a successful evaluation. We do not have, as many governments do not, a pay-for-performance program that indicates that that is a requirement, and that is part of what's bargained year after year with unions. So I think it's important, because I think if someone were tuning in and listening today and saying, seriously, you're changing that, you're taking away the need to do a good job, and I want to be really clear that that is not the action that's being taken here. This is simply the decoupling of a paperwork process that previously has held up people who have completed their year from getting their increase until their supervisor was able to get an evaluation completed and get that paperwork trail all the way through the system. And this is in order for people to get their employees to get their raise when it is deserved, as opposed to being held up by a paperwork process. Is that a fair representation?
Yes, that's very accurate as well. I just wanted to be clear. I am not aware of anyone who has not currently received a step increase because of this process, but it is something we want to clean up and be clear about.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Other questions and comments, commissioners?
I thought I read somewhere, and I could be wrong, so please correct me if I am, that if somebody was under a performance improvement plan, that their step increase could be paused until the successful completion of a performance improvement plan.
I would have to look into that for you. I don't have an answer off the top of my head. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And I think I saw that in an employee handbook that related not to union, but related to non-represented employees. But that is a good question to confirm. That is one of the challenges the county faces, is that you have 2 union contracts, and then you have non-represented individuals, and there are some different rules that apply to each. And I do think I've seen that related to non-represented, but I don't know about, don't believe it sits in the union contract. Questions, Commissioner?
I have none.
Okay, questions for the commissioners? Would we prefer to have that information prior to moving on these actions? Okay.
No, because we're obliged in terms of the union contract.
Then I would look for a motion, and we will take them one at a time.
Madam Chair, I move approval of a memorandum of agreement regarding Oregon AFSCME Local Number 2734 for step increases.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
And Madam Chair, I move approval of a memorandum of agreement regarding Teamsters Local 223 for step increases.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. All right, commissioners, do we have any board concerns for today?
Not at this time.
Nope.
Okay, nor do I. I will get our meeting announcements read, and we will be done. Commissioners will hold a board briefing on Wednesday, February 19, 2025 at 2 p.m. to discuss weekly commissioner updates. The meeting will be held in the Board of Commissioners Meeting Room 106 at the Tillamook County Courthouse, 201 Laurel Avenue, Tillamook. The teleconference number is 1-971-254-3149, conference ID 866-914-607#. The commissioners will attend a Tillamook Lightwave meeting on Tuesday, February 25th, 2025 at 9:30 a.m. The meeting will be held at the Tillamook PUD in the Carl Raw Meeting Room, Tillamook. Okay. With nothing else to come before us today, I will adjourn this meeting at 10:31 a.m. Thank you, ladies. I'll be walking. I have run a leg of it before, but this time I'm walking 3 legs of it. So instead of going for, so okay.
I'm supposed to run, I think we're the only half marathon team, but I'm a little bit concerned because I did the classic overtrain and make mistakes.
Oh, no. Oh, no. I was supposed to.
Anti-inflammatories and go for it.
There you go. Well, you'll probably run past me then, because I'll be one of the walkers.
I was supposed to be support. I was supposed to be driving a van, but I had to meet the commissioner.
Thank you for